League of Women Voters. The League is a non-Protestant, well, it is that too. It's a nonpartisan membership group which has a long commitment to voter education and voter services. We hope that many people in our audience tonight, both our audience here in Town Hall and our audience watching us on television, will also consider becoming members of the League of Women Voters. We need you, and we need your ideas, and we need your support. Tonight's presentation opens our program year. The many issues of housing and land use and planning have been discussed a great deal in the League of Women Voters for a very long time. Way back in the 1960s, attorney Sarah K. Wallace, who was one of the founding members of the League, was active in what was the really first community assessment held here in Brookline. And her legacy has stayed with us in many ways over the years. Decades later, in 1998, the Brookline League was active in another community process, which then led to the forming of the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance and also led to the community's comprehensive plan for 2005 to 2015. In recent times, we've had much discussion in the League of all of these issues of housing, land use, and of community planning. Some of that discussion has occurred in programs like this one this evening. Some of it has occurred as discussion at our board meetings, and some of it has occurred at informal coffee sessions, which we hold once a month at Panera's in Coolidge Corner. Those are held on the second Friday of the month. Now, the day after tomorrow is the second Friday. So anyone who would like to join us, our discussion this time in October will actually take up questions that are raised by tonight's speaker. So that may be of interest to you, and if you'd like to continue talking with us, please come and join us at 9:30 on Friday morning. Just a quick word about tonight's program. Many of you already have been handed a green card like this, and if you have questions that you want to address to the speaker, please write them down and hold up your card. You can do this anytime during his presentation, and somebody will pick it up from you, and we will have some handy help up here from two of our board members in sorting through questions. There are sure to be many, and the time will become short toward the end of the evening. With that, I'm going to turn this microphone over to Betsy DeWitt, who is a member of the board of directors of our league, and she herself has had long involvement in the government of Brookline and in talking about planning in Brookline. Betsy.
Thank you, Margaret, and I'm a co-chair with Janice Kahn of the committee planning for the activities that will be going forward. As you've heard, the League is committed to making land use a priority in the coming year. We know that there are at least 9 studies underway in Brookline, actually 10, if you consider that the Conservation Commission is undertaking a regular review of the town's open space plan. So that makes 10 studies all in the pipeline, and that means there's going to be lots to talk about over the next months. Already in the works are an elementary school site study that will report findings to the Board of Selectmen on Thursday, October 22nd. After that, there is a study of Route 9 East with MIT graduate students. They will have a public report to the public on Wednesday, October 28th. At the time, we don't have a time and place, but if you check the town calendar, it will get posted. There are actually several articles on land use that will be voted at the town meeting, the November town meeting, starting on the 17th of November. The Economic Development Advisory Board will hold a workshop on planning for a changing community on December 7th. For this, reservations are required, but you can go to the EDAB website for more information to sign up for it, and it'll also give the location and the time. And then finally, the Conservation Commission will be holding a public meeting later in the year, sometime probably in December, to discuss updating the town's open space plan. That, again, will be posted on the town's website. And I will say, in formation, not yet actual, but the League is hoping that we'll be able to put together a page on our website that will list all of these events as we get official notice of time and place. So, the League will be hosting informational meetings and also working with the town to inform Brookline residents about the proposed projects that will have great impact on quality of life, open space, affordable housing, neighborhood preservation, traffic, transportation, and much, much more. Moving ahead tonight, we're very pleased to have Anthony Flint, a fellow and director of Public Affairs at the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, and he also is a Brookline resident, who will speak on current strategies for smart growth and affordable housing. Mr. Flint has been thinking about planning issues over his 30-year career as a journalist. You've probably seen him in the Boston Globe, and a policy advisor and writer. He's the author, among others, of Battling with Moses, chronicling the passionate and influential battle of very different visions for New York City in the 1960s between the grassroots community advocate Jane Jacobs and Robert Moses, the city's powerful chief proponent of urban renewal and expressways. This is a struggle not unfamiliar to those of us who were living around Boston and Brookline in the 60s and 70s. The Lincoln Institute has also just recently published a policy report on inclusionary zoning as a strategy to provide affordable housing. Brookline has had an inclusionary zoning bylaw since 1987, and there's a brief summary, I think, on the handout that you got tonight. So, without any more comments from me, let's hear from Mr. Flint.
Pleasure to be here. Last time I was here was before the Historic Preservation Commission, and so my task here is easy by comparison in terms of the brief. I have made a bit of a career out of communicating about planning, or at least that's what I aim to do. As a writer of these books, including Wrestling with Moses, that Betsy referred to, what I have as a goal is to communicate about the built environment and the challenges that are facing our cities, and try to interest a broad audience in those subjects. And so that's what I hope to do tonight, and to open up more lines of communication about the subjects of planning and housing and land policy to the widest possible audience. So I should say I'm quite anxious, however, about being here, not least because in an otherwise excellent essay submitted by Betsy and Janice for the Brookline tab, the name of my organization was mistakenly switched from the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy to the Lincoln Institute of Land Police. So naturally I was concerned that this may have drawn out the many libertarians in the community. And to them I would say, let me assure you, we have no such designs on strong-arm enforcement of any kind with respect to land use. I am here only to share ideas and some of the current thinking in my world. The Lincoln Institute is a think tank, a nonpartisan private operating foundation and 501c3. We were founded in 1974 with roots that go back to the Lincoln Foundation to just after World War II. We focus on the use, regulation, and taxation of land, and believe that solutions to many of the world's most pressing problems can be found in land policy. We're international in scope with major programs in China and Latin America, and we're concerned with global urbanization, climate change and resilience, sustainability, urban planning, the fiscal health of cities, and land conservation. I'm anxious as well tonight because the last time I spoke about planning in Brookline, the event was publicized with this flyer. I hope everyone can see. The question is posed as smart growth, smart for Brookline? And as you can see with the illustrations, it's more than just a rhetorical question. At the top is the Tower of Babel, and at the bottom is Picasso's Guernica. And so I attended that discussion with some trepidation. But I'm happy to report, however, that smart growth is indeed smart for Brookline, and it's really been happening quite organically or naturally, given the incredible assets of this community. Just take transit-oriented development. Places like Minneapolis and Phoenix and Denver are discovering what we've been building on here in Brookline and what we've had in place here in Brookline all along. Zoning reform, though resisted at the state level these many years, is similarly sweeping the nation. And one new approach to zoning is, of course, the form-based code, which is focused more on the configuration of buildings rather than the use that goes on inside of them and their historical separation. So the idea here, and this has been very much embraced in this community, is that zoning is more of a living, breathing work in progress. It should be updated, and there's no reason to leave a code that was written in the 1920s in place today when circumstances have changed so much. But the trick, of course, is reaching consensus on the implementation of sustainable urbanism, and the path forward is not always clear. There are many legitimate concerns about capacity, congestion, of course parking, and the appropriate scale and character of our urban villages and neighborhoods. Concerning the often thorny issues of height and density in urban centers, we offer some tools to help citizens visualize density. There's a book and a subcenter at the Lincoln Institute website by that name. And we talk about as well the essential ingredients of making walkable places successful places that are incredibly economically successful, like Brookline Village or Coolidge Corner, or the subject of one section of Julie Campoli's excellent book, Made for Walking, Davis Square in Somerville, for example. And the context for all of this work has very much to do with density, well-designed density, and neighborhood form. Bless you. Participatory planning and citizen engagement in the planning process is at the heart of these efforts, not just to reach consensus among stakeholders with different views, but to allow the community as a whole to have a better sense of envisioning a collective future. So technology is a great help in this regard. We've been developing a set of tools, a number of free open source scenario planning tools that allows everyone to judge the future outcome of planning decisions and policies. The idea here is to make this available to communities large and small, to make it open source and free. Scenario planning allows citizens to picture what the future will look like in 20 years based on different policies established now. So there's an A, B, and C, and it's all very visual and able to be adjusted want to live here, starting with the excellent school system. I myself made this classic quitting South Boston for Walnut Street, where my kids walk the 3 blocks to Lincoln School. This is what Doug Foy, the former chief of the Office for Commonwealth Development, defined as smart growth, and that was being able to walk to school or walk to a library. But the price of admission is steep. The housing markets here are functioning as they are in many other desirable communities. Anticipating the popularity of Greenwich Village, for example, Jane Jacobs called it the problem of over-success. And we face these challenges in gentrification from white-hot real estate markets from San Francisco to New York City. Well, late last month, as Betsy mentioned, we published this policy focus report. It's available for free download. You just have to go to the Lincoln Institute website, which is www.lincolninst.edu. And with this research, we've attempted to make clear that one policy can work very well to marble in at least a modest amount of affordability in new residential development. Inclusionary housing or inclusionary zoning, where a percentage of new development, say 15%, for example, is required to be provided by developers as affordable. So, major takeaways are that it works best when the homes are mixed in on-site, and the real secret is in the follow-up. This isn't the sexiest point of the report, but it's so important that in implementation, communities have to make sure that the affordability isn't lost after subsequent transactions, after the first sale. This requires stewardship that can be outsourced. The research also debunks the myth that inclusionary housing or inclusionary zoning ordinances deter a position that Mayor de Blasio in New York City is currently confronting. And of course in the white-hot real estate market of San Francisco, where some are actually clamoring now for a complete moratorium on new development in places like the Mission and other neighborhoods, and where others have called for the inclusionary housing requirement to be up to 40%. So if we're feeling bad about the situation around here, we need only look to San Francisco, where things are even more intense. Reasonable inclusionary housing policy, not that it cannot be continually adjusted, fine-tuned. So I go into more detail in the discussion following the presentation on inclusionary housing. Another concept that we've done a lot of work on is and that's catching on, is the idea of the community land trust in the context of shared equity housing. The community land trust, the basic idea is that buyers purchase the home, but not the land that it sits on. So there may be a 99-year ground lease that's controlled by a community development corporation or other entity, often working with a municipality, and there are some modest caps on resale, again, to try to make this permanently affordable housing. So there's nearly 300 community land trusts nationwide. We helped form the National Community Land Trust Network, which is actually meeting later this month in Kentucky to encourage and discuss best practices and some of the experiments in the community land trust that we've seen from Vermont to New Mexico. Our CEO and president, George W. Mac McCarthy, who came to us last summer from the Ford Foundation, published an op-ed in the Boston Globe last fall calling on the federal government to make an administrative adjustment to allow FHA-backed mortgages for community land trusts. Well, we think community land trusts and shared equity housing we think of it as a third way between home ownership and rental. although, of course, it's quite reasonable to have rentals continue to be a major part of any community's housing portfolio. Other strategies might include continued relaxation of prohibitions on accessory dwelling units, those in-law apartments and granny flats that can instantly provide affordable housing in so many communities across the Commonwealth if these rules were liberalized and relaxed. Micro apartments and micro housing, a changing demographic that includes a lot more singles, younger singles, as well as empty nesters and retiring or aging baby boomers that are right-sizing their lives. These are smaller spaces, and by definition, the aim at least is more affordable because of that reduced square footage. It can be as little as 300 square feet, and that's all a lot of residents need with the city right outside their front door. Now, it can look quite small at first. The picture actually here next to the schematic is a cell at Le Corbusier's monastery at La Tourette, and it's the exact same size and configuration of a room that's now part of a hotel at Unité d'Habitation in Marseille. And the manager told me when I visited there researching my book on Le Corbusier that when she's showing this to couples, this particular room in the hotel that's this small, she always pauses for a moment before she opens the door and asks, "Are you in love?" But things are changing, and the space requirements, as I indicated, are changing. We need less space, and there are some really beautiful ways of designing some of these micro apartments. This is some of the work by Bjarke Engel's group, good examples of well-designed density, efficiency, and comfort. I'm not necessarily suggesting this for Brookline, but I just give it to you as an example of the sense of ferment that's out there these days. This is a movable micro-housing prototype designed by a University of Texas professor in Austin, who, by the way, spent 10 months living in a converted dumpster in an experiment with cutting down on possessions and living in tiny housing. Again, I'm not suggesting this. I'm just merely pointing out some of the design innovations that are out there. After the dumpster experiment, he worked with an industrial design firm called Frog to create a template for a 208 square foot single occupancy city apartment. Well, now pivoting once again and addressing the question of how to pay for it all. At the Lincoln Institute, we've launched a campaign that we're calling the promotion of municipal fiscal health, to bring various cities back from the brink of insolvency, to get planners and local public finance folks to begin talking to each other once again, to address unfunded mandates and capital planning for infrastructure, given that so many cities have been forced to make really bad choices and put off those kinds of investments in the maintenance and creation of urban infrastructure. And generally, just to get the fiscal house in order for municipalities. Taking a moment to talk about one important component, really the foundation of municipal fiscal health, and that's the property tax. It's such a basic democratic covenant for the provision of services, and one must pity the property tax, really, as states across the nation look to impose caps and limitations on this most democratic of taxes. They generally don't work very well, our research has shown. Some recent work on the Taxpayer Bill of Rights in Colorado showed that 80%, the vast majority of Coloradans, actually pay more in property taxes after the passage of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. In defense of the property tax, I should also note that even China is set to adopt it. This is an interesting and little-known fact that in China, officials are exploring adopting this system of the property tax. We're helping them do that as so many fast-growing cities in China are burdened with this incredible debt of trillions of dollars. We also address this and caution against this policy, which is seen more in places like Boston and Cambridge, of a kind of a race to the bottom competition to offer tax breaks and other incentives to lure business location that doesn't end up working very well. We're also here to help in encouraging negotiated voluntary contributions by tax-exempt nonprofits and advise avoiding a one-size-fits-all approach in payments in lieu of taxes. This approach is in recognition of the win-win relationship between anchor institutions and the community. These institutions provide huge benefits, starting with jobs in terms of the local economy, and so it's not so simple as to talk about a burden on services or locking up land as tax exempt. Our work in this area has not made us terribly popular among our colleagues in the nonprofit world, but we think it's a better alternative to what we've seen unfold in places like Maine, where the governor has actually proposed the elimination of the nonprofit tax exemption over a certain threshold. There's a small problem with the tax exempt status for nonprofits being in the state constitution there, but as it is in most states, but that's another story as well. So at this point, I'd like to get really crazy, thinking about financing the future, and invoke this man, the 19th century political philosopher Henry George, who, by the way, inspired the founder of the Lincoln Institute, John C. Lincoln. So what could this man possibly have to do with local public finance? Well, he recognized that government action, such as a zoning change or public investment in infrastructure, a train station, for example, prompts huge increases in property values for private landowners and developers. He characterized it as a windfall. It can also be thought of in legal terms, in terms of property rights, as a giving rather than a taking, a government taking that we hear about so often in property rights cases. He proposed the land value tax, where the true value of land, in contrast to improvements on land or buildings on land, was assessed based on its location. This has been attempted with varying results from Hawaii to Pennsylvania, and more recently explored in Connecticut, which has a pilot program allowing municipalities to experiment with the land value tax. Some of the struggling but potentially regenerating legacy cities in Connecticut, like New London and Bridgeport, are giving it a look. Mayor de Blasio, again, has essentially proposed a land value tax to encourage the redevelopment of vacant parcels in New York City that are being held on to for speculation. And we are also interested in the land-based financing tool of value capture. It's among the financial tools that we're exploring as a way of being more innovative or creative in paying for the urban future. Value capture can be used to promote more balanced urban development and, of course, the provision of badly needed infrastructure. Latin America has been a leader. In Sao Paulo, for example, developers start with an FAR floor area ratio of 1. If they want to build any higher, the rights to do that are in effect purchased in actually a stock market. Now, when I've talked about this in the past, I've always been a little bit concerned with being run out of town as a rabid socialist of some kind. But the concept is getting traction right here in Massachusetts. And we may have had something to do with that. Stephanie Pollack, the State Transportation Secretary, floated the idea when confronted with the cost overruns in the extension of the Green Line through Somerville. The city of Cambridge similarly sought to bring in the private sector in supporting transit, where it's such an integral part of the success of booming areas like Kendall Square. We've already seen boiled-down versions of this with the construction of stations by Federal Realty at Assembly Square in Somerville, and the commuter rail station funded by New Balance. A little-known fact is that the house that we moved into actually was where Jim Davis grew up on Walnut Street there at the 1890 Pudding Stone townhouse. We have had zero interaction, but I just think that's a marvelous fact or trivia. The concept of value capture is inherent as well, by the way, in inclusionary housing. It's a kind of trade-off. In return for government action, such as a density bonus, the community gets more affordable housing in return. So in the end, land-based financing tools are yet another recognition of the win-win dynamic of urban development and redevelopment. And with that, I would like to bring things back from Sao Paulo to Brookline once again and segue to what I'm sure will be a robust discussion on some of the ideas and practices and current thinking from my world. So thank you very much. So how do we want to do this?
Sandy Ostroy, our Vice President, is coming forward with some questions, and we hope that many of you have had some questions and thoughts stirred up here. Okay.
What developer am I working for?
Oh, well, do you want to talk about that? The first question that has come forward is, how can we ever achieve 10% affordable housing if current affordable housing goes to market value after a number of years?
Well, it's an excellent question, and of course the threshold for Chapter 40B, I know, is a great concern, and there's this idea that how can communities like this possibly ever, in effect, catch up? And the idea of permanently affordable housing, I think, comes into play here, and that's why it's so important. It's so important by definition to keep affordability in the community, but it also serves this function of counting, as affordable units. So that's where that stewardship and follow-up comes in on policies like inclusionary housing. In community land trust, there's a cap on resale profit. So the goal always in these strategies is indeed permanently affordable housing in contrast to market rate housing. Accessory dwelling units can accomplish some of that, and there's a little recognized sector, and it doesn't really apply so much in Brookline, but that's manufactured homes. in many communities, perfectly legitimate stock of affordable housing and unsubsidized affordable housing that hasn't gotten very much recognition in the world of housing because people associate it with trailer parks and double wides and so forth. But taken together, you can cobble together permanently affordable housing units to work against that, to work up to that 10% threshold.
All right. Moving to another topic, but certainly related. Given that bus routes can easily be added, can Brookline ascribe to equal distribution of affordability across town?
Well, there is when I was in state government, we were looking at this idea of smart growth guidelines for 40B development, and the question was, really how much of this could be enforced and how much of it was voluntary, but the whole idea of affordable housing is kind of joined at the hip with more urban locations. So by definition, we're talking about different areas of Brookline as opposed to other, sort of more suburban environments. And the competitive advantage of the urban areas is such that you can get more efficiency, different sized homes that I made reference to in terms of the micro housing and some of the other trends we're seeing in the design professions really capitalize on that. But that would indeed be more suited to places like Cleveland Circle or Coolidge Corner. And it also, when the affordable housing, the multifamily housing is critically near a transit station, that becomes an important part of being suitable housing for lower income or more modest income families to be able to cut down on transportation costs, perhaps not own a car, and all the expenses associated with that and so forth. One of these is going to be a trick question, I just know.
You didn't actually speak to that issue of the easy provision of bus routing.
Right.
The next question certainly relates to a point made by the speaker. What enforcement mechanism do you suggest for requiring nonprofits to make those voluntary contributions to city?
The Tony Soprano school of negotiated settlements. So it is the law of the land. Nonprofits are tax exempt, and so what we encourage with the report that I flashed on the screen on payments in lieu of taxes is a negotiation that recognizes how town and gown benefit each other, and that it's a win-win relationship, and there are things about each of those that benefit the other, so that it's not a sort of a one-sided negotiation. There are those who have lost patience, like I mentioned, the Maine governor just going ahead and proposing the elimination of the tax-exempt status. So short of that, we feel that a more measured approach is better, and that these agreements can be negotiated in good faith, But at the end of the day, they are voluntary agreements. So the way things are right now, that voluntary dimension is going to be there. If institutions don't want to participate, then they can continue to not participate.
Is it possible to come up with a percentage of affordable housing for different populations? That is, the elderly, single occupancy, families.
Different to try to address those different segments of the demographic.
Is it possible to come up with a percentage?
Well, I mean, I think thinking more holistically about affordable housing and access to transportation and amenities for families. I tend to think that those amenities and all those things associated with decent and affordable housing applies kind of universally and across demographic segments. And so similar to how we've in planning have embraced this idea of mixed use and indeed even mixing income levels within a single residential project, I would also advise not separating the demographic groups in that way necessarily. It's a sort of a more universal design approach to housing that's good for families just as it is for seniors.
There are obviously many different concerns coming out about issues here in Brookline. So this one says, how do you propose to start a productive conversation about height, which seems to be a non-starter, but is a necessary condition for achieving more affordable housing from our scarce land?
All right, well, it's an excellent point, and I spoke a little bit about that at the beginning of the talk, referring to such tools as visualizing density. There are other gaming approaches, actually, that help everyday citizens picture height and density and scale in ways that are not so frightening, or at least where some preconceptions can be reworked or fall away. And it only takes a few examples we found where you show a picture of a neighborhood in Paris, for example, that is 150 dwelling units per acre, and it looks beautiful. And so I think it is possible to have people think of height and density in different ways, and to have that illustrated, and to kind of use technology, which is so abundant and so wonderful in the things it can do in terms of visualizing all of this, to a great advantage. And in terms of a conversation, there are the scenario planning tools that I suggested, but there's also the incredible power of social media and social networks in having that conversation. And right next door in Boston, in the Boston 2030 process, there is a robust civic engagement component that's going to make use of in social media, Twitter and Facebook and so forth in some effective ways.
A brief question, but a very big concern in Brookline right now. Have you ever thought about where we could build another school?
Well, I've been following this discussion, and I have two kids at Lincoln School. I thought it was a respectable path to think about how all the schools could be added onto or redesigned or tweaked, and the reuse of the old Lincoln School I thought was a good use of that space, and the siting of a brand new school is pretty tricky. One of the wonderful things about Brookline, of course, is the open space and the recreation space that's so wonderfully marbled into even dense areas, right here in the Brookline Village area, and there are other open spaces I know that are being looked at, larger spaces in different parts of town, but you obviously have to think long and hard about taking over any space that's devoted to parks and recreation and open space. I think there are ways to be creative and to look at adaptive reuse. It's really something that cities across the nation are getting into. In Baltimore, for example, they're taking these, well, I think they're beautiful, old abandoned industrial manufacturing buildings and turning them into maker spaces. And without perhaps sounding too idealistic, I wonder if a similar reuse of an existing building or complex might be possible.
The next question seems as if it's one that certainly has been of consideration within the Lincoln Institute. Housing affordability is a national problem, but it is only addressed at the local and state levels. What could the federal government do to cause the supply of housing in our major metro regions?
Well, it's another great question. As we are all painfully aware, the federal government has really backed away from the housing business after Hope 6 and Section 8. The role of the federal government and indeed the state government in providing housing is certainly changing very rapidly, and it is up to local communities to explore these strategies very much on a local level, like with an inclusionary housing ordinance. And so that is a burden, and many of us wish that wasn't the case. But the federal government has other priorities and intentions right now, and that's one area that has certainly fallen away. There can be tweaks and adjustments that can go a long way, however, in terms of regulation and code reform, and then also little things like I mentioned in the talk, making an administrative change so that you can get an FHA-backed mortgage to purchase a home in a community land trust. And so right now that's not possible. There's no reason not to change that. It would just require an administrative change at HUD. And so those kinds of turning of the dials at the federal government level can go a long way. But unfortunately, that's the kind of smaller bore stuff that we're left with in terms of the federal government.
The next question takes us in a different direction, but one which is certainly of rising interest here in New England and also in some other parts of the country very currently. What about the idea of moving populations away from areas of coast which would be most affected in rising sea levels? This contrasts with the notion of creating more density in Brookline.
Just got to move people to Nebraska and we'll be fine. Well, I didn't among the different themes that I tried to explore. I didn't include climate change and resilience, but that is a very important topic for us at the Lincoln Institute, and certainly Boston is rightly concerned about sea level rise. Even if we somehow come up with a clean energy policy that would reduce carbon emissions tomorrow, we're still going to be living with a couple of degrees of temperature rise and anticipated sea level rise, flooding and storm surge, and more volatile weather in our future. I like Boston's approach, and that is taking some cues from the Dutch and working with water. So you may have seen the proposals for a canal, for example, along East Berkeley Street. I think that really will be part of our future, and so there are ways that these coastal cities will have to learn to live with more water, like the Dutch have, and that'll just be much more part of our world. But it raises a good point. This is especially a particular concern in the developing world, where some of the most vulnerable populations are in coastal areas subject to flooding and of course, sea level rise. So that is a big concern. Moving people in some of those, even informal neighborhoods, is very difficult. The trick, I think, is to address climate change, to adapt to its inevitable impacts through some of these both hard and soft means. So yes, I think the communities of the coasts are pretty much stuck with the people that we have. We can't move them to Nebraska. Nothing against Nebraska. It's a very pleasant area.
We have a question which refers to a court case. Do you have a view on the municipal use of eminent domain taking for the express purpose of higher density development to increase local tax revenues? The case is Kilo versus New London.
Well, it's I was told that there would be no that there wouldn't be a test afterwards, but no, I'm actually familiar with the Kilo case. It really was really brought the issue of property rights and some of the more conservative views on property rights to the fore. 5-4 decision in 2005 or 2006, I believe it was. And Jane Jacobs was actually filed an amicus brief. She was against the idea of sort of large-scale planning, and this was, of course, the proposal to redevelop a big swath of New London. And the pharmaceutical company Pfizer was at the center of this planned redevelopment. It was a master plan. It it was big plans, and this was going to save the city of New London. Suzette Kilo in her little pink house was against the idea, wouldn't go along with being bought out. She was a holdout. And the case went all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, it actually confirmed the rights of states to do planning, but I think it stirred a lot of fear and anxiety and concern that big plans and certainly the use of eminent domain should be used quite sparingly at this large scale, where it's more likely to stir up this kind of opposition and to get holdouts. So in a way, the decision was in favor of planning, but it was really a victory and kind of a ratcheting down of the aspirations of planning. And I guess I would say that that's appropriate, that eminent domain should be used sparingly, and that a smaller scale of planning is almost always a better idea than, in many cases, than these big plans, these big master plans and visions for sweeping redevelopment that you saw on such a grand scale in places like New London.
We have just one more question, which includes a piece on the size of housing units. Tonight the speaker spoke about micro-housing units, and I was reminded that we actually had, and some of you may have visited, the teeny tiny house which sat out in the nearby parking lot here at Town Hall during Climate Change Week. And this question is not quite that, about housing quite that small, but goes like this. It starts with, it's a two-part question. It starts with, why feel bad about 40% inclusionary housing? And the second part, what difference between an 800 square foot apartment versus a double wide trailer?
So the second, I just want to make sure I understand. What's the difference between a micro apartment?
Their question was 800 square foot apartment and a double wide trailer.
Yeah, what's the difference? So there isn't much difference, right? Yeah. Well, that's why the idea of sort of recognizing manufactured homes is really just a sort of a cold-eyed appreciation of this incredible stock of unsubsidized affordable housing, and sure, that's plenty of room for a lot of people. Some of whom might want to, have dreams of moving into a 3,000 square foot home, but for so much of the demographic, just to take the second part first, the space requirements really are changing. And the key thing, again, is that you have the amenities of the city, a park, a tea station, and places to eat, a grocery store, right outside the front door. And so for many people in different circumstances, singles particularly, these space requirements are in fact changing. And so why feel bad about, I guess I was thinking that maybe there aren't any developers in the room, but it'd be shocking to propose that there be a 40% affordability requirement, as has been proposed in San Francisco. But if people aren't shocked by that, then I don't know. I guess that must be in Brookline. That seems a bit steep. There is an argument to be made for it, that the real estate that the housing markets being varying so much by region, that 40% might be pretty outrageous for, say, Atlanta, but it isn't for some neighborhoods in San Francisco. And what we're working on is kind of the next step following the inclusionary housing report is something that's in beta right now. That's an affordability calculator that can, in a more transparent way, show how developers can still make plenty of money, but increase the portion of below market units in their projects. And developers may tend to say that, you know, it can't possibly pencil out, but this affordability calculator we're hoping will show how the numbers can actually work.
We received one last question, and this one is one that certainly has been mulled over by lots of experts, I'm sure. And the question is, how are you defining affordable housing?
Right, yeah, it's good. I mean, New York is really struggling with this, and it's an excellent question. So, in Boston's inclusionary housing ordinance, it's defined as families earning 80% of area median income, and you know, that's for many of our communities, that's still a pretty good income. And I think the idea has always been to think about the middle class, about police officers and teachers and others, and worry about providing at least sort of a modest but permanent strata of housing for those types of families. But it is more middle class, and that's just the reality of you know, trying to use these market-based policies as a way of getting housing that's just at least a little more affordable.
Thank you to many people in the room for tonight's presentation. We had many people in the league, including our board, many of whom are here tonight, who played a big part in both proposing this program and making all the arrangements to make it a really good evening here. We have in the audience many of you who are active in different ways in the life of Brookline. Several of our selectmen are here tonight, and we appreciate their presence. And I think many of the people will still be around for a few minutes if people wish to talk to them, including our speaker. Again, to remind all of you, this was a program of the Brookline League of Women Voters. We have many activities during the year. You've seen us as we register voters at many sites. Please consider becoming a member of the League of Women Voters. Thank you for being here with us tonight, and thank you to those who are watching us as well on television.